Hey everybody, it's GauntletX and welcome back to some more Magic Arena, and today I'll be playing this week's Midweek Magic event, which is going to be a Dominaria United Phantom Bot Draft. What that means is that we're going to be drafting against AI when we build our deck, and then playing against human players. However, because it is a Phantom event, we won't be keeping any of the cards that we draft. We're just going to be using them for the duration of this event. That being said, it is a completely free event because it is a Midweek Magic event, so this is a great way to play some more Draft, play some more Dominaria United if you're into either of those formats, and we'll be getting free rewards, 2 random rares and a random mystery cosmetic for playing through the event. So there's some free stuff for you. If you like a little bit of free stuff, if you enjoy drafting, this is a free way to draft. If you don't care too much about either of those, if you're a strictly business type person, if you are pretty competitive with drafting and you want to get some practice for the upcoming quick draft format, then this is also a free way to do that because Dominaria United is going to be coming back starting next week. So with that whole introduction out of the way, let's bust open our first pack and see where the cards take us today. Alright, so here's our pack 1 pick 1 where there are several powerful places to go. Unfortunately, our rare is not one of those places. All of the lords in the set, all of the creature type focused cards like the Elf Lord, the Merfolk Lord, the Goblin Lord, there's just not really enough support in those individual creature types for these to be good in draft and sealed, unfortunately. They are very cool cards for constructed, but it's a Phantom event, so no rare drafting here. We do have some very nice uncommons and a few sweet commons. So Keldon Strike Team is great in the red-white aggro deck, going to spit out 5 power with haste when it hits the board, spread amongst 3 creatures, which is great with some buff spells like Heroic Charge that buff your whole team. So Keldon Strike Team is probably the best common here. Take Up the Shield's a fantastic combat trick as well, but I would much rather have my creatures ready and know what colors I'm going in before I start taking excellent combat tricks. So if we want to take a common, if we want to just play an aggressive deck, Keldon Strike Team is the way to go there. I'm going to take one of these uncommons though, and pretty much all 3 of them are competing. I think the weakest is Love Song of Night and Day. 3 mana for a 2/2 flyer plus a +1/+1 counter on something else is pretty solid. The really important part to know about this is that because it has the read ahead mechanic, you can skip that first chapter, which you pretty much always want to do. There's a Territorial Morrow here, which is a fantastic card for the domain decks. It's going to be a 5 mana 6/6 to 10/10 basically every time, because this is a format with non-basic lands that have basic land types like Geothermal Bog, and these are common, so on average you're going to see about 1 per pack. Some packs will have 0, some packs will have 3, and so on there. So the domain archetype is really fun, quite powerful, and the Morrow is a great card for that. But Urg, Spawn of Turg is another card that is quite good for the domain archetypes if you focus on black and green primarily, and it's just good in black and green decks in general. Very high toughness, it sits there surveilling throughout the game to set up your draws, and the longer the game goes on, the bigger this becomes until it ends up being your win condition as well. So I like Urg as well. I like a lot of these cards, but I'm a pretty big fan of the domain decks. They're a lot of fun to play and draft, and they're some of the more interesting decks to draft to show off when to try to prioritize your lands and stuff. So I think I'm going to show off a domain deck today if we can get the cards for it. So I'll take a Territorial Morrow here and kind of show off how to draft domain if it's open. Pack 1 pick 2 doesn't really have anything for the domain deck. There's a Vine Shaper Prodigy which could fit in there if we're playing a decent amount of blue. But I think the best cards here aren't really domain cards. There's Impulse, which is fantastic instant speed card selection in blue. You get to look at the top 4 cards of your library, pick one of them, put it into your hand. There's also Colt Conscript, which is a great aggressive black card. A 1 mana 2/1 that can keep coming back to the battlefield. I think these 3 are the top 3 best cards. The domain decks, because you draft non-basic lands super highly, we could take a Geothermal Bog here if I want to just lock myself onto domain immediately. But the other thing about taking these non-basics so highly means that because you're going to have so much mana fixing in terms of your mana base, in terms of your lands, you don't care too much about cards like Deathbloom Gardener that add a mana of any color. Now, if you're going to be playing a million off-color cards, you can still go for the Deathbloom Gardeners, but I actually prefer the domain decks that are just like 10 non-basics and no Deathbloom Gardeners. So I'm not actually that interested in that. Did want to mention it, though. I think I'm just going to take like an Impulse here or a Cult Conscript. I don't think I'm going to be missing out a massive amount not having a Bog or a Vineshaper Prodigy right now if we do end up in Domain. So I'm just going to scoop up an Impulse. I think all of the blue decks in the format are quite powerful. Blue's one of the best colors, does some really nice stuff. Pack 1, pick 3, there's a Baird for red-white aggro. The red-white mechanic in the format allows you to give one of your creatures +X/+O, where X is whatever you tap alongside it. That's called Enlist. So that makes it so Baird triggers and you get a 1/1 in your end step. Also, if you have any +1/+1 counters, auras, or equipment on one of your creatures, you'll also get a 1/1 during your end step every turn. So Baird actually pretty nice. Cult Conscript again is nice. Shadow Prophecy is a massive draw spell in domain decks, because if you have full domain, if you have all 5 basic land types, you look at the top 5 cards of your library, put 2 into your hand and the rest into the grave, which is insane. So Shadow Prophecy could be the pickup here. Gaia's Might is great in aggressive domain strategies where you're giving +5/+5 potentially, and then the dual lands are great as well. Wooded Ridgeline, Radiant Grove style cards. So I think I'm just going to scoop up the Shadow Prophecy here and go for one of these like massive card draw domain decks and see where we go from there. Now a Sojourner can get cost reduced based on the domain cost. Vineshaper Prodigy could be a 2-for-1 value play. Idyllic Beachfront could be our first duel. And there's nothing super strong off colors, so I think we would just take one of these 2 solid domain cards or the land. And I think these are weak enough to scoop up the land over those. I'll take the Beachfront now. Weatherseed Treaty is an MVP for domain decks. You take this over almost anything else because it searches your library for basic land, puts it on the battlefield tapped, then shuffles. That alone is pretty good, but you are getting a 1/1 as well, which is very important, making it so you are both fixing your mana, ramping up, and still playing something that affects the board to defend yourself. Then chapter 3, you're even giving something a massive buff, trying to finish your opponent off with it. And the flexibility of that read ahead means if you top deck this late game, you can immediately hit chapter 3 and just give something +5/+5 trample to finish your opponent off. So really flexible, really strong card. Fantastic stuff there. Gonna take the Weatherseed Treaty, taking it over Urborg Repossession, which is a great late game value play, recurring 2 of your creatures from grave back to hand. Destroy Evil, a great cheap removal spell. Vineshaper Prodigy, nice 2-for-1 value. A lot of solid cards we're taking it over, but Weatherseed Treaty is fantastic. Miri's Outrider, another card I didn't notice there, but fantastic in domain decks. Just a 5-mana 4/4 reach that shoots your opponent in the face for 5. Pretty ridiculous card. Alright, none of this is spectacular in domain. We could take the Extinguish the Light and be green-black as our core 2 colors to this domain deck, or we could just take one of the duals here. I think those would be solid. That's a pick 6 Extinguish, so black does seem pretty open, so we probably will do that. The way that I like to do these domain decks is to kind of try to have 2 colors at the core and basically splash in everything else. So if we're going to be like green-black at the core, Extinguish the Light should be pretty castable, even though it is double black. Now we can take Sunbathing Rootwalla, fantastic creature for domain decks because it's your early game creature. To hit the board, trade off, block where you need to stay alive until you get to cast your big late game spells, or if it manages to survive till late in the game, then this kind of becomes your win condition. With 5 domain on the board, you can make this a 7/7 every combat with 4 mana, so Rootwalla is fantastic. I'm taking it over primarily Destroy Evil, which is a great removal spell that's pretty easy to splash in, so we could absolutely scoop it up in these domain decks, but I'm a very big fan of Sunbathing Rootwalla, so I will scoop that up instead. Scout the Wilderness is okay in these decks. I like it a little bit better than the Deathbloom thing, the 3-mana 1/1 that taps for a mana of any color, since it puts a basic into play, and if you top deck it late, you get to put a couple 1/1s on board while you do that, but it is definitely much less efficient than the Weatherseed Treaty. A much strictly worse card than that. We could take Linebreaker Baloth or that, so there's not much competing, so I'll still take the Scout, but I could see it ending up getting cut here. And now Urg, Spawn of Turg, when black-green is the core of our deck, this card's going to be fantastic. Scoop that up over the duel, and we will scoop up some nonsense here, and probably need to take duels really highly during Pack 2. Already taking them highly enough now where I'm going to take one over the combat trick. This doesn't seem like a super aggro domain deck, more like a grind it out over the course of a long game one. Nice late Destroy Evil. We could splash that in. We've already got 2 white sources in the deck. Okay, Pack 2, pick 1. There is Evolved Sleeper. We are heavy in black right now, and this card is super good if you have double black on board and you have it at level 3, where you can start putting counters on it and drawing extra cards. Yep, we'll take Evolved Sleeper. Pretty simple stuff. Take the Great on-color rare. Bortuk Bone Rattle, huge domain payoff. 6 mana, 4/4. When it hits the board, you reanimate any creature from your grave with mana value less than or equal to the number of basic lands you control. And even if you don't have a high domain, it's a 6 mana 4/4 that returns another creature from your grave to your hand, which is still really good. So Bortuk Bone Rattle is like an S tier card for domain. Love to see that stuff. Alright, I gotta take a Sacred Peaks here over a Bog Badger and a Pilfer, which are both playable, but we need more duels. There's Cut Down for super efficient removal, Sunbathing Rootwalla for another good cheap creature, or Molten Tributary for another good domain land. We're sitting on 1 removal spell right now, just Extinguish the Light. I think that it's slightly more important here to get another cheap interactive removal spell than it is to get another dual land, especially since this one's completely off color. I do like having like green-white, green-red, green-blue duels here, or black-white, black-red, black-blue duels. Duels that are 1 color on, 1 color off, so that we can end up with like 10 green sources, 7 black sources, and then whatever various amount of off-color sources off of those. So if this were half on color here, I would probably take it over Cut Down, but since it isn't, I am going to take that Cut Down for removal. There's also a Rootwalla in that pack. Hopefully we can wheel that, but I definitely have to take Cut Down over a Rootwalla. There's another Shadow Prophecy for another fantastic card draw spell. Would love to scoop that up, but I'm probably going to take Sunlit Marsh here, again, half on color duel, and that gives us 4 white sources already, so we can definitely play Destroy Evil to up our removal count, so we're at 3 removal spells. There's now 4 white sources. That's perfectly fine to splash in a single white card. We can also play a single Plains with our Weatherseed Treaty, I suppose. I don't like any of these cards, really. The Elfame Worm, the Hexbane Tortoise, a little small for their costs. Bone Splinters, we have nothing to sack for it well. Scout the Wilderness I'm already thinking about cutting, and Braid's Frightful Return is not really for this kind of deck. Again, wanting expendable stuff to sacrifice. So this pack feels like kind of a miss for us. If we get enough blue sources, Tolarian Geyser's pretty solid, but I don't think we will. Just take another Scout the Wilderness, I guess. Pick 7 now. Another bit of a miss of a pack. Not super into any of this. I'll take a Splatter Goblin. I think that's at least playable here. Contaminated Aquifer over not much. Could take a Mana Worker if I want to splash in off-color stuff. But it doesn't look like I'm doing a lot of that. I'm mainly just domain to get all these huge payoffs. In this build, we didn't open up any like super powerful off-color stuff to try to splash in. Now a Sacred Peaks, and things are going pretty well here. I was worried the bots started drafting dual lands much higher than they usually do. So to say, usually I draft domain basically like I'm doing here, where I do take like the big payoffs first, but then I'll take the duels over any like mediocre filler. That's how I do it in bot drafts. In player drafts, where you're drafting against other players, I do take dual lands a bit more highly. Try to take them over anything except the best playables. But bot drafts, I find the bots don't value duels incredibly highly, and you can kind of draft like this, where there's any solid playables or better, just take those. And if you're just taking a decent filler card that'll make the cut, just take the dual land over that. And luckily, it does seem to be working out that way this draft pod, but I found that to be how it works in most bot draft pods. And yeah, we're doing fine. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 duels. So even if we took 0 dual lands for the rest of the draft, we'd have a good amount for domain stuff already. So feeling pretty happy about that. Now we just need to make sure that we have enough non-land cards to fill out the deck, because there are 6 cards in our sideboard that we're not currently playing, and I would rather not have to fill my deck out with Toxic Abomination and a non-aggressive strategy, Snare Spinner. I mean, Snare Spinner can make the cut. Aggressive Sabotage, stuff like that. Just really would rather not have to play. I guess I'll have to just play these Mana Dorks and land tutors for now. We've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16 non-land cards. So we need to find 7 more non-land playables. So what is the best playable for domain strategies? You might think it's Rada, because Rada says domain on the card, and Rada can smack in for a bunch of damage, but I'm not actually that impressed by Rada. I think that domain strategies don't have a particularly hard time finishing the game, and that's the only thing Rada does particularly well. She's really not a very good blocker as just a 3/3. I think I would much prefer something that's just an excellent blocker for its mana cost, just kind of a big roadblock. And for that, there's 2 main cards here. The one I'm going to take is Magnagoth Sentry. 4 mana for a 4/4 reach, just solid, beefy creature for its cost, and it can block almost anything since it has reach. That's what I'm going to take. But we could also consider Argivian Cavalier as another roadblock style creature, because we're getting a 2/2 and a 1/1. We're getting 2 bodies off 1 card. And we have 5 white sources in the deck off of dual lands alone, so with 1 plains in the deck, we should basically never not have white mana to cast cards like Argivian Cavalier, but I'm going to take Magnagoth Sentry here. Take the green card. So Citizen's Arrest, like 5, 6 white sources still seems a little bit low for like a Citizen's Arrest for a double white card, but single white cards are pretty easy for us. Could try to splash in a Vohar, but we only have 2 blue sources without putting a basic island in here. Vohar is quite strong, quite fun, but I don't think I'm trying to splash that in. Probably just take Phyrexian Rager. Green and black are the core colors of this deck. We're going to have more sources of these colors than anything else. Basically, all our basics are going to be forests or swamps, and Phyrexian Rager is a great value play. 3 mana 2/2 hits the board. You trade it off with your opponent's 2 mana card or whatever, but you've drawn a card off of this, so you end up a card in that exchange, which is quite nice. We'll take the Rager here. Could also take the Vine Shaper, but I think Rager's a little better, just a little cheaper in general. Pack 3, pick 3. Phyrexian Warhorse is another roadblock style creature with 6 white sources in the deck, plenty of black sources. This should be pretty easy to kick it. On turn 5, get a 3/3 and a 1/1. Could take another Deathbloom Gardener, I guess. Could take a Bone Splinters, I guess. Or a Rulik Mons. Rulik Mons, again, another card I haven't been super impressed by in these domain decks. I've played them a few times, they're fine. But it's another card that's only benefiting us when it's attacking. It's not super important. Take a Phyrexian Warhorse. Take a Contaminated Aquifer, another Magnagoth Sentry, a Zaro Janin. Zaro Janin is the best of these 2-color domain legends that we've been seeing so far, because this buffs your entire board pretty much every time it attacks, but again, it has that same issue where it doesn't do anything unless it's attacking. Technically, if you can tap it for any other reason, you can get that to trigger, but that is definitely a corner case that's not going to happen super often. I guess Shalai's Acolyte's a fine finisher. I already feel like I'm doing okay on finishers, even with just these 3, just with Territorial Marrow, Boartuck, Bone Rattle, Writhing Necromass. Erg is also kind of a finisher. Sleeper can be. Sunbathing Root Walla can be. I think I'm doing okay there. I really just want to get stuff to block pretty well. So Sentry or Aquifer are the main 2 things competing. Might actually take Aquifer here since it's half on color at least. Yeah, I'll take Aquifer over Magnagoth Sentry. There's an Urborg Repossession, fantastic late game value play. Like to try to grind things out in the late game with a bunch of 2-for-1 value. Bortuck, Bone Rattle, Urborg Repossession, Shadow Prophecy style plays, rather than like one big creature like Zaro Janin, so I'll take Urborg Repossession. Ooh, alright. We're definitely not lacking on finishers now. Tachiova, Steward of Tides, is an absolute bomb. Once you have 6 lands on board, that's usually when you want to cast Tachiova, so you have to treat her like a 6-drop. Then, when you have 6 lands on board, pass the turn to where it's turn 7, then play Tachiova, play your land for turn, immediately set things up where you have a 3/3 and a 3/3 flyer off of her. Even if your opponent immediately casts a removal spell on her, you get a good amount of value just by doing that. And if they don't, they're going to die pretty quickly because every single draw in your deck becomes just straight up action. Every non-land card in your deck you just cast like normal, and every land in your deck is now a 3/3 flyer with haste. So that is super nasty. Tachiova's a massive finisher, and we're very happy to have found her in this final pack. Alright, I really don't like these non-land cards, so Geothermal Bog it is. Take a Snare Spinner. Snare Spinner and Mana Worker are very similar, but Snare Spinner, I guess, gives us some protection against like blue-white decks. Mana Worker makes sure our mana is working for us, but I have 4 black sources without basics. I guess I only have 1 green source without basics, so I have to play basically all forests here. Yeah, that's 8 lands and then 9 forests. That would be the mana base. That would put us at 4 black sources. Yeah, the mana is actually a little bit awkward here. I probably should take a Mana Worker. Vine Shaper Prodigy seems excellent to me. I'm not going to take another Mana Worker over a Vine Shaper Prodigy. Excellent 2-for-1 draw spell. There's a Cavalier to clutter things up. Could run that over Scouts or Deathbloom Gardeners. Okay, probably not playing any of these. I highly doubt I'm playing 2 Deathbloom Gardeners when I already want to cut the first one. Alright, and this should be relatively easy to build, because usually you draft so many non-basics with these decks that you don't have to cut too many non-land cards. Yep, 42 cards here, so we're going to cut 2 non-land cards. This is a perfect 17 land deck. We could run 18. Tachiova wants a ton of lands. Our curve's a little bit high, but not dramatically. I think I'm just going to run 17 lands here. Alright, cut down, Evolved Sleeper, Urborg Repossession, all incredible. Destroy Evil off of all these white sources is great. Impulse, we've got 4 blue sources. Yeah. I might cut Impulse and run Tachiova off of exclusively the duels. Drop the island here for another forest. Puts us at 8 green sources, 6 black sources, 5 white sources. Seems pretty good. I think I'll do that. Okay. Definitely some filler. Not a ton of filler in here, but a little bit. And it's all at the 3 mana slot. Everything else in the deck's excellent, except, I mean, Mana Worker is just kind of a necessary evil right now. But what is the most filler between Scout the Wilderness and Deathbloom Gardener? Well, we've got enough basics, or non-basics in this deck, that we're only running 2 colors of basics. So Scout the Wilderness definitely goes down a lot in value, when we don't have room for like putting a mountain, a plains, or anything like that in this deck. We don't need full domain that badly, so we could cut like a Sacred Peaks here, because this is like almost double off color. Actually, Beachfront is the closest to double off color. Maybe cut 1 Sacred Peaks for plains. Let's make our basic land tutors better and cut the Deathbloom Gardener, I think is what we want to do. So cut Sacred Peaks for plains, because we don't care about a red source at all. It is strictly for domain. So if we only have 2 red sources in the deck, that's fine. Only 2 mountains in the deck, that's fine. We don't need full domain for any of these cards. It would just be nice, you know? And then cut an Idyllic Beachfront for an island. And this makes it so we have one white source that's tutorable off of our 3 rampant growth effects, our 3 land tutors. And then we'll have one blue source that's tutorable to those. And I'll still have a decent quantity each. Not that I need a super decent quantity of blue sources, I just need to make sure I've got the one for Techova late game. But that really makes sure I have that, and it makes it so these can help up the domain more easily. So now we have one less white source than before, 1, 2, 3, 4 white sources, but 3 cards that can tutor them out, instead of 5 and 0 cards that can tutor them out. So I think that's nice. I think I like that. I suppose the island, again, still doesn't seem completely necessary. It might be better to run the blue-white duel than the island, because there's just Techova for blue. So that is still a debate. If we had like a blue-red source or something, then we would insta-cut that for an island, but yeah, white, we've got 2 white cards. Just the one Techova in blue. I guess I will play beachfront over the island and just not have a tutorable blue source. That's really close there, though. I don't know. I'm just going to keep going back and forth. I'm going to put the island back in over the beachfront. 2 white cards is not that much. And Techova is so strong, I want to try to make her castable as consistently as possible. So we'll do that here and call it a deck there. All right, here we have a final look at the deck for today. This is a green-black domain deck. So we're going to be running a ton of just solid on-color green and black cards, particularly a lot of good card advantage style stuff and land tutors to get us set up. So we have cards like Phyrexian Rager that draws a card when we play it, Vineshaper Prodigy that can draw a card if we kick it, Evolved Sleeper can draw additional cards off of that 3-mana ability eventually, Urgspawn a Turd can set up our card draws to set up our future plays, but all of these are going to put us a little bit ahead in card advantage, help us dig through our deck pretty quickly so that we can more consistently hit more non-basic lands, more off-color lands to up our domain count to make our powerful finishers even more powerful. Cards like Shadow Prophecy can turn into a draw 2 out of the top 5, so really good card selection is what it can turn into. Weatherseed Treaty can turn into a massive +5/+5 trample buff, and Bortuck Bone Rattle can reanimate pretty much anything from the grave. Territorial Marrow can turn into a 10/10 if we have full domain, and Sunbathing Root Wallet can buff itself into a 7/7. So this is one of the kind of classic 2-color, 5-color decks in the format, where you have your 2 main colors, in this case green and black, splashing in everything else just for domain purposes, but also for whatever really powerful cards you hit in those colors. Our powerful splashes here are Destroy Evil for an excellent removal spell, Argivian Cavalier to clutter up the board, keep us alive, and Techova as a fantastic finisher. So pretty spicy deck today, looks pretty strong in general. Should have a pretty fun time with it, but without further ado, let's just head into the gameplay and see how it does. Here we are for game 1. I am going to keep this hand. We can scout the wilderness for our swamp, and then we have all of our colors except for blue. If I draw a swamp before then, I can scout for the island instead. But this looks great mana-wise, and we have that Snare Spinner to just clutter things up in the early game. Our opponent starts with a forest and passes the turn. Almost every green deck in this format can do some amount of domain, and with a salvaged mana worker coming out turn 2, feels likely that that is the direction our opponent is headed in. Probably going to have to play this Sacred Peaks on turn 4, so that I can still curve out Snare Spinner into Scout. Since I don't have a 4-drop in the hand, it should be pretty easy to skip a land on that turn. Ooh, unfortunate hand for our opponent. They are stuck on double forest salvaged mana worker right now. So we're in a pretty good position to get set up while they're stuck. They are green-red. Green-red tends to be a more aggressive version of the domain deck, where you run all of the off-color duels just to up your domain count for your Sunbathing Root Wallas and your Gaia's Mites. The Gaia's Might being just 1 mana instant +5/+5 till end of turn with full domain. Get a Sacred Peaks here. I could just cut down the Mana Worker to be rude. It's probably the right play. I mean, it feels really rude, but it's probably the right play to keep them off of any potential splashes. If they have a combat trick, they can save it here. And then we just trade a cut down into a combat trick, which is a lot less exciting, but it looks like they don't. So just poke them for 1, keep things rolling here. Again, our deck's pretty slow. It's just going to grind out a long game pretty well with cards like Urborg Repossession to pick up 2 things. There's the Destroy Evil target. Blow up that Magnagoth Sentry. Our opponent's on green, red, and black here. But again, when you see a forest from your opponent in Dominaria United, you gotta assume they're doing some amount of domain, because that is the domain color. So you always expect more than 2 colors from a green deck in this format. There's a Rada. We're pretty okay with that here, since they don't have any other creatures to buff. So Rada's just a 3/3 by herself. And we're trying to put our opponent on the defensive and doing a decent job at it, so Rada's basically just a 3/3 here. It'll be a decent amount of time before they can start attacking actively with Rada and another creature, even if they do get another creature on the board. So we attacked in with Splatter Goblin, because this gives something -1/-1 when it dies, so it can pretty freely attack into a 3/3. And it'll trade into it if they block. Ooh, Bortug Bone Rattle, let's go. So now if they trade their Death Toucher into my Root Wall, I'll just Bone Rattle it back. If they block it with Rada, I'll just buff it. So we're going to wipe their board here and then Bone Rattle the Root Walla back. Should be pretty great. And then we have the Urborg Repossession in hand, so that if Bone Rattle dies, we can return Bone Rattle and Splatter Goblin to our hand and then recast a Bone Rattle later to reanimate something else. This is where the 2-for-1 reanimation cards like Bone Rattle and Repossession really pop off. When you get them together, they become even more busted. There's a Thrill of Possibility. Our opponent discards a card to draw 2. Drops a Vanquisher's Axe, no creatures on board to slap that onto, so not a good time for our opponent. I think we kill them faster by playing another creature than by hitting them for 4 more damage there, so let's play another creature. This only goes poorly if they can wipe the board, and there aren't too many board wipes in the format. If they play another mountain, they could have the 5 damage to all creatures spell. Or if they play another swamp, they could have Drag Down, which gives everything -X/-X, where X is 1 plus their domains. That'd be -4/-4 to everything. So Drag Down wouldn't kill our Necromass, but the red board wipe would kill everybody. Don't remember the name of that. Either way, they do not have a board wipe there, so we are going to finish off the game with some big beef. Start things off with a victory in round 1. Grab our random rare reward. We get a Pia Nalar, Consul of Revival from March of the Machine Aftermath. Actually a pretty fun commander for Historic Brawl. I believe I have a Historic Brawl video out of Pia Nalar if you want to see her in action. But she's pretty fun. You can play all of the red and white, mainly red cards that allow you to exile cards from the top of your deck, and then you can play them from exile. And then every time you do that, you're spinning out 1/1 flyers with haste with PNLR on the board. So she's really sweet with that kind of stuff. There's a lot of cute little interactions you might not think of as well that fit well with her, where if you have any creatures that are on an adventure from Eldraine, where you cast the instant or sorcery on the card to put them on the adventure, and then you cast them from exile later, those trigger PNLR as well. And battles, if you deal enough damage to a battle to flip it into the other side, then you are technically casting the other side from exile, so that also triggers her. A lot of cute little synergies with her. Pretty cool card, pretty fun build around stuff, and I think she's only going to get better when Wilds of Eldraine comes out in a month, because we're going back to Eldraine. I imagine we're getting some more creatures with adventures attached, which means we're getting more creatures that we can cast from exile, so fun stuff there. Alright, here we are for game 2 with an excellent opening hand. We've got a turn 3 Urg, Spawn of Turg. Our mana worker makes sure we have the blue source for Tachiova if it's still on the board that late in the game. Got an Extinguish the Light coming up as a removal spell pretty soon. A lot of great stuff in this hand. We also have 4 out of 5 land types for Domain now. There's the Inscribed Tablet for our opponent, letting them look for some lands in the top 5. And they are on red-white aggro, which is red-white enlist kind of is the main mechanic there. I guess I could technically play the Plains thanks to Mana Worker and still play Urg, so I suppose I'll do that to up the Domain immediately. And opponent is just gonna scoop them up. They don't like the Urg or whatever they drew off tablet. I mean, they just drew a land off tablet, so whatever's in their hand apparently just not great at getting through an Urg. I mean, we saw a bit of their deck there. We saw they had the Yavimaya Crusher, 2-mana 2/2 enlist, the 2-mana 1/3 Vigilance enlist. It just looked like red-white enlist aggro stuff. But opponent is going to scoop them up here. You are going to experience that a lot during midweek Magic events, because they are completely free. There's absolutely nothing on the line. There's no cost to losing a game. So there will be some pretty quick concessions, which means that if there's ever a midweek Magic event, which is a format that you don't enjoy, but you still just want to get the prizes, if you just show up with something, just any pile of playable cards, it might take a little bit of time, but you'll always be able to find your wins. Sometimes opponents will draw poor hands and they'll just leave pretty quickly, because again, no real cost to conceding during midweek Magic. So I guess we'll just get a free pass during round 2, but we'll see what our random rare reward is there. And it is going to be gems from Innistrad Crimson Vow. I am always happy to get more gems added to my collection, so I can put those to great use in the future on some more drafts. So I guess we're just one win away from the Mystery Cosmetic. Just get back in there, battle it out. Alright, here we are for game 3, Unkeepable Opener. This is much better, but still risky. We need to get to that 3rd land for the Scout the Wilds, ideally. I've got 1 black source thanks to Sunlit Marsh. I think I'm still dropping the double black card. I don't think there's a better option. I still want that Tachiova pretty badly as a finisher. Our opponent is on blue, black, and red so far with a Haunting Figment. Haunting Figment, definitely the kind of card you see in a lot of blue-red spells decks. So they might be blue-red spells splashing black off of the Aquifer. Okay, we have made it to our Scout the Wilderness mana. Grab a blue source for Tachiova or a 2nd black for Urg. Because I have a 2nd copy of Scout, I'm going to pick up that 2nd black for Urg, since we don't want to play Tachiova until we have 6 lands on board and a 7th in hand anyway. And they definitely look like blue-red spells with some black dual lands for whatever powerful thing they want to splash in. I could... This is kind of weird, but I'm just going to take another setup turn and just make it so if I hit any land, I can just play Tachiova next turn. Let's kick Scout the Wilderness for the island. Get to Amplifier kicked, meaning that they can bounce one of our creatures when it comes into play, which is very good against our tokens. Alright, and we did hit the 7th land, so now I can just play Tachiova, drop a Sacred Peaks, make a Flying Hasting Forest. I guess I'd rather play Urg than hit them for 3 immediately, so we'll do that. And this is a pretty excellent board state. They probably do have a removal spell to kill Techova at least, but the forest will remain a 3/3 forever. It just doesn't have flying unless Techova is still on the board. Alright, they're digging. Maybe they don't have removal yet. Cast a Thrill of Possibility first, discard a card and draw 2. They do have the Lightning Strike, so there goes Techova. And the Amplifier is a 5/2 because they've cast 2 instants and or sorceries this turn. I should consider chumping with the 1/1, but I think I'll just take the 5. I mean, they could have a bunch of Miria's Outriders, which would be a big deal. Okay, now I'll definitely chump. They put a combat research on it, so every time it hits me, they draw a card. Yeah, I'm not going to let them draw the card and hit me for 5. Evolved Sleeper on top. I will take that. So I could destroy the combat research with Destroy Evil, but I'd rather kill a creature with that later, so let's drop Evolved Sleeper. I could sack a land at instant speed, make this a 1/5. Still not good enough to attack in, we just hit with the forest. Pass turn from there, holding up the ability to sack a land to Urg or level up the Evolved Sleeper. We also have the mana for Destroy Evil. Pretty solid stuff. If they can't consistently cast more instants and sorceries here, then Urg is a really good blocker for the Amplifier. Alright, I can't make that big enough to survive another Lightning Strike, so there goes the Evolved Sleeper. This is a really good blue-red spells deck here. Alright, well they're definitely going to cast another spell as a trick to kill Urg, but I can't really let them draw cards infinitely. I guess I could just Destroy Evil the combat research. How likely is a blue-red deck to play a creature with 4 toughness or greater? Not massively likely, honestly. They could have Tolarian Terrors, that's the one card that they could have. Maybe it is worth it to just kill the combat research and take 3. Yeah, I mean, I think if I just make sure they're not drawing extra cards, I should be fine. Keep my Surveil on a stick on the board, so we can set up our draws while they can't, and that is how we plan to win. How we plan to grind it out. Third Lightning Strike. Oof. The dream draft pot for blue-red spells. So statistically speaking, 3 in the top 15? They're quite likely to have more if they're going to draw that many that early. But maybe they just drew all 3 copies that they had. But that is obviously a super premium card for the archetype. Great stuff there. Urg's getting bigger. Urg's doing his thing. I could start sacking lands into Urg here and attacking in. I could also hold this land in case I can reanimate Techova. I've got 2 ways to do that. Maybe I'll start holding lands in the future. Okay, if they want to spend a spell to kill my spider, that is super okay. But definitely, again, just not going to put Urg at any risk here. Fires of Victory. So they draw a card, shoot something. Yeah, their deck is very, very good. So yeah, that would have killed Urg if we blocked Urg. Pretty happy to not do that. Now that the Amplifier's tapped, I think attacking with Urg is probably fine. Since again, I'm not really going to want to block, and now that I drew Writhing Necromass, it's definitely fine to attack. Dominaria United is such a sweet format. I mean, there's just the 5-color nonsense domain decks, and you will see a lot of that, so it could be a little boring if you play domain and then run up against domain all the time, but almost every 2-color archetype in the format is also really good. Like, there's a very nice streamlined build of every 2-color pair, and our opponent is really showing off how to build these blue-red decks super well. Tons of cheap burn, and the amplifier to get really nasty. Extinguish the light. I do have double black. I will keep that. Gonna extinguish in response to them trying to kill with shore up. Send in the Necromass. It's much less important than Urg. They have to cast 2 spells to kill my Necromass here. So I'm not going to extinguish in response to that. Okay. Yeah, that's fine. So we kill the Amplifier and get rid of both their shore-ups with the Necromass, which is solid value. There's Bortuk for Techiova. I don't have another land in hand, but that is still pretty nasty. Alright, if they have a combat trick, I have the Extinguish. If they don't, we just play Bone Rattle post-combat. They did top deck the combat trick here. Twinferno, give it double strike till end of turn. That's still a trade. With Bortuk, I think that's okay. I think I still just save the Extinguish. If it would have won the combat without them losing a creature, then I think I would have blown it up, but now I can just keep it. Amplifier bounce Techiova. Phyrexian Warhorse, that's a nice one. Play that this turn since I don't have a land to play. We can just save Techiova till we do. I suppose there is Essence Scatter in this format, 1 and a blue to counter a creature spell. Opponent could be banking on drawing that before we recast Techiova, and now I gave them an opportunity to do that. So maybe it would have been worth running Techiova out just in case they top deck a counterspell this turn. Because unless they top deck the counterspell this exact turn, then yeah, I'm just going to run Techiova out this turn. And they didn't hit the counterspell, so we are really closing things out here. And this is where we just grind out these late games. I was pretty scared early in the game. I guess I was never that low on life. I'm at 19 here. I did sack a couple lands to Urg, which means I gained some extra life. But, oh wait, that wasn't even going to kill her. But I can stop them from drawing a card, so I'm going to do that to make sure they don't draw into an out. I think that was probably the play anyway, but I didn't realize when I did that it wasn't even going to kill Techiova. But by sacking Techiova, I make it so they don't draw the cards, so they have no outs. They can't draw into like a board wipe out of nowhere. That was a little loose, though, because I was just assuming it was going to kill her. I was just talking about some other stuff. I think I was talking about how I think I sacked some lands to Urg early game. So I think we got a little lower than this. I think we got down to like 14 or something, but I was really worried about the board state. Their amplifiers putting in a lot of work. Really nice deck from our opponent. I like that a lot. Super sweet blue-red spells deck. Double Fires of Victory. Triple Lightning Strike at least. Super, super good stuff. Very fun deck. Very fun archetype, but we do show off the power of Domain at grinding out these late games. Really a lot of good work from Urg. Sifting through a bunch of extra lands, getting us towards our gas, and every time that we were dumping lands in the grave, Urg was getting even bigger to become like a must-be-killed threat. And then obviously Techiova being just a ridiculous finisher, and Bortuk Bone Rattle, just kind of the MVP of the whole thing. This card is just busted. So Lots of busted uncommon legends, but when you're the domain deck, you get to play whatever ones show up, whatever ones you want to draft. You can definitely cast them. So 3 wins for the Midweek Magic event. Let's find out what our mystery cosmetic reward is. It is a Parallax card style for Captain of Umbar. Don't really like these Parallax card styles. Not only are they the most common cosmetic reward you can get, which makes them a little boring, they also just don't look super great to me because of the mirroring on the edges of the card. I don't know why, it just bugs me a lot, and you can really see it on Captain of Umbar, where you look at the right hand side of the card. In order to get the 3D effect working, they've expanded the borders of the card by flipping the artwork on the edges, which just makes it look really weird when you see the tent like coming to a big triangle, or the sail, I mean, coming to a big triangle and coming back down. Super weird stuff on the right hand border. But it is still a free event. We still got 2 free rare rewards, even if I would rather just not have the Parallax style in my collection. So solid stuff overall. We got another PNLR, which is pretty cool, and we got some gems, and we got to play some free Dominaria United. But that's going to end today's event. There will be more Dominaria United quick drafts coming in a week. I don't remember the exact day that they swap over, but that's why this week's Midweek Magic event is Dominaria United bot draft, because that's going to be the next quick draft format. So Dominaria United will be back soon if you're interested in playing that format, or if you're interested in watching more of that format, then stay tuned for that. Stay tuned on Arena for playing it, and stay tuned on the channel for watching a little bit of it. So that is gonna end today's video. As always, I'd like to thank my patrons and my YouTube members for their support, as well as you just for watching the video. If you'd like to see some more videos like this, you can always like, comment, and subscribe to tell the YouTube algorithm to send you some more of these videos in your recommended feed. If you'd like to catch me live, you can check out the Twitch channel in the link in the description below, and if you'd like to support the channel directly, you can check out the Patreon link or the join button below. Other than that, as always, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon for some more Magic Arena.